grave if it's mine to choose. Feels like there's nothing left for me to lose. I'll dig my grave. How many times I've got to tell you I'm all caught up in bad advice? So many times I've had to hear you say, you know what you gotta do. I used to hang on to words that make my sting if you stung me first, but I passed the point of needing you to understand my views. It gets lonely, but I've learned by now there's more emptiness in the smiles you're forced to wear. I dig my grave if it's mine to choose. Feels like there's nothing left for me to lose. I dig my grave. There's that obsession again with everything going to plan. Sometimes I hear the fear in your voice, and then I think of the poisonous words imagined. The only way that we can connect is when we're looking back with reflective moods. But then I remember you too. It gets lonely, but
Hey everyone, you stumbled upon Diverge Media. I'm Greg Staley, your host. Tonight we'll be talking about big tech censorship striking in Canada, and we'll be talking about the United Nations UNDRIP agreement. Is it making its way to Canada through Bill C-15? And now to Broderick Visser for some cancer screening statistics.
Almost 1 million fewer cancer screening tests were performed in Ontario during the COVID-19 lockdowns and restrictions in 2020 compared to the year prior. According to Queen's Park Briefing, the provincial data shows this and is resulting in concerns that cancers out there may have not yet been detected in people. In 2020, from March to December, there were just over 950,000 routine tests for various cancers performed. When you compare that to the same period a year prior, the numbers are so much higher, with almost 1 million more routine tests performed at 1,949,620 tests. The data obtained by Queen's Park Briefing from Ontario Health showed the following for the 10-month period: 321,489 fewer mammograms through the Ontario Breast Screening Program, a decrease of 53.1%. 368,446 fewer Pap tests through the Ontario Cervical Screening Program, a decrease of 46.6%. 307,330 fewer fecal tests through the Colon Cancer Check Program, a decrease of 55.5%. In a statement to QP Briefing, Dr. Shady Ashamala, a surgical oncologist specializing in colorectal cancer, said that the early detection in these cancers saves lives, so that by this measure, a decrease in screening programs will have very dire consequences. He also said that doctors would agree and say that they've seen more symptomatic and late-stage presentation cancers than ever before. He states that this is due to the very dramatic decrease in screening. A recent article from LifeSite News titled "Bombshell: Stats Canada Claims Lockdowns, Not COVID-19, Are Driving Excess Deaths" says that these deaths are not only due to COVID-19, but due to indirect consequences of the pandemic, decreased medical procedures, and increased substance use. Things that we've known for quite a while now. The Stats Canada report states that because of the lockdowns, people with substance use issues couldn't receive help through the substance use treatment programs that they could before. The report listed delayed cancer screenings, a plummet in Canadians' mental health, a damage caused to low-income Canadians as consequences of the lockdowns and restrictions put in place by government authorities to help keep people safe from the virus. For colorectal cancers, a 6-month suspension of primary screening could increase cancer incidence by 2,200 cases, with 960 more cancer deaths over the lifetime, the report stated. The report noted that when it comes to breast cancer screenings, a 3-month interruption could increase cases diagnosed at advanced stages 310 more, and cancer deaths 110 more from 2020 to 2029. Adding that a 6-month interruption could lead to 670 extra advanced cancers and 250 additional cancer deaths. So while the government wants to help keep us safe from this deadly virus, they have inflated the overdose, heart disease, and cancer deaths, as well as preventing many life-saving surgeries all in the same timeline. Of course, by now, they know this and we know this, but they aren't changing the course of direction when it comes to these lockdowns and public health measures, many of which you can see aren't beneficial to preventing deaths and are more focused on decreasing cases and keeping you huddled up in your home, away from anyone else to talk to or learn from besides the mainstream media. If you'd like to support Diverge Media, visit divergemedia.ca/donate-to-diverge. And if you'd like to buy one of these nice hats, they're available at divergemedia.ca/shop. This has been Broderick Visser for Diverge Media. Have a good night, everybody.
All right, now let's talk UNDRIP and let's talk big tech censorship. All right, here we go. Big tech censorship strikes in Canada. It is worse than you know. So independent MPP Randy Hillier from Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston made the announcement via Facebook that Twitter has once again locked him out of his account. This time, his account was locked for daring to share a video produced by 6 Canadian doctors who dissent from the government and media's COVID-19 narrative. Here's what Twitter told the Ontario parliamentarian. At Randy Hillier, what happened? We have determined that this account violated the Twitter rules, specifically for violating the policy on spreading misleading and potentially harmful information related to COVID-19. We understand that during time of crisis and instability, it is difficult to know what to do to keep yourself and your loved ones safe. Under this policy, we require the removal of content that may pose a risk to people's health, including content that goes directly against guidance from authoritative sources of global and local public health information. So as if this message wasn't condescending enough, they added more fuel to the fire by ending the emails by saying, for more information on COVID-19, as well as guidance from leading global health authorities, please refer to the following links, and then gave a referral to FAQs about COVID-19 from the World Health Organization. If they can remove the President of the United States from Twitter, what would make any Canadian think that this won't happen here? Did we dilute ourselves into believing that their censorship would stop at the leader of the free world? They have only been emboldened on their quest to remove all voices that dissent from the authoritative sources of global and local public health information, and this will only lead to many more topics and censoring of those who disagree and dissent from the mainstream points of view. And it's already begun. Diverge Media spoke with former PPC candidate Mark Friesen. Now, the Saskatchewan man who has been fined numerous times for exercising his right to peaceful assembly and protest has told us that he has also become the target of social media tech giants. Mr. Friesen told Diverge Media that his accounting service, KPMG, in Saskatoon, will no longer provide him tax services because of his political activities. He now has to find a new accountant and start all over again. He also told Diverge Media that he has been banned from PayPal and Payoneer, a PayPal alternative that he believes was a result of the viewpoints he holds on certain topics. He told Diverge Media that he couldn't even open a Payoneer account after his PayPal account was banned. He said, they sent me a verification. The second I hit the verification, they sent me a follow-up saying, nope, you're on a list. I asked Mr. Friesen if PayPal gave any reasons for his removal, but nothing was given other than a generic letter for violation of standards. I asked Mr. Friesen if he was going to attempt to appeal the decision from PayPal, but he responded by saying, no, I could waste my time much better than that. I asked Mark if he felt the decision was politically motivated to ban him, and here's what he told Diverge Media. Oh, 100%. 100%. It's connected to my website. They just go to my website and they see what my website promotes, and that's all they need. And of course, you know, on the website, there's a COVID-1984 tab. There's a UN agenda tab. So it's not going to be long before GoDaddy, my server says you're gone too, I would think. I asked Mr. Friesen if he felt censorship would get as extreme as it had in the United States, where social media companies like Gab were forced into creating their own infrastructure. He said, yeah, not only that, that's coming for sure, but just to deal with the financial. It's not going to be long before the bank freezes your account because you don't fit in with a narrative. I mean, if PayPal, a financial services company, can do it to you, the bank's not far behind. Just imagine what that looks like. You want to talk social credit? We're in it. I agree with the sentiment that Mr. Friesen was putting forward. If financial institutions and institutions that offer financial services can refuse you based on your political actions or your political beliefs, then where are we going and how long will it be until a bank tries to do the same? You can check out that story on Big Tech Censorship on divergemedia.ca. Under Big Tech Censorship Strikes in Canada, it's worse than you know. Make sure to like and share that one out to inform people on what's going on inside of Canada. Now on to UNDRIP. Canada one step closer to the United Nations UNDRIP agreement. Second reading of Bill C-15 has taken place. UNDRIP, or the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, is at the core of Bill C-15. The bill says that it is an act respecting the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. But what does it seek to do? Bill C-15 says that the purpose of the act is to affirm the Declaration as a universal international human rights instrument with application in Canadian law, and to provide a framework for the Government of Canada's implementation of that declaration. So essentially sounds like they want to take the framework of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and implement that into Canadian law and into its framework. Now, this means that the Canadian people need to understand what the UNDRIP agreement is and what the implications for their day-to-day lives could be in order to understand why this matters. Now, they said they will take all measures necessary. Now, in Bill C-15, under a section titled Measures for Consistency of Laws and Achieving the Objectives of the Declaration, the bill addresses just how serious it should be taken to ensure that Canada aligns itself with the United Nations Declaration. The bill says the Government of Canada must, in consultation and cooperation with Indigenous peoples, take all measures necessary to ensure that the laws of Canada are consistent with the Declaration referring to the UNDRIP agreement of the United Nations. I asked the question in the article, well, what do you mean to take all measures necessary to ensure our laws are consistent with the Declaration? For instance, we get into it here. There are a few articles contained within the UNDRIP agreement that are so concerning that even a quick cursory glance through the document will draw the reader's attention to them. So one of the things you can do when researching documents is the use of Control F. Now, on the UNDRIP document, if you hit Control F and you put in land, you will find all sorts of interesting information. Specifically, Article 26 of UNDRIP says that Indigenous peoples have the right to the lands, territories, and resources which they have traditionally owned, occupied, or otherwise used or acquired. It continues by saying Indigenous people have the right to own, use, develop, and control the lands, territories, and resources that they possess by reason of traditional ownership or other traditional occupation or use, as well as those with which they have otherwise acquired. So the issue here is there's a difference between having the opportunity to own land and having a right to own land. One is a God-given thing, is implied that it is a given, and the other is something you can earn on equal footing. Now, we pull up now we have a link in here called Native Land. Now we have a link in the article called Native Land from nativeland.ca, just to illustrate how much of Canada was formerly Indigenous land. So you can see every square inch pretty well of our nation, if not all of it, was traditionally Native-owned land. So in the regard to the UNDRIP agreement, the discussion is obviously what this means for us here in Canada if almost all the land was traditionally owned at some point in time and they have the right to own it, use it, and develop it. So they say they have the right to own, use, and develop and control the lands that they traditionally owned or otherwise occupied or used, as well as other land they have otherwise acquired. So the issue here is that in Canada, traditionally owned was almost all of Canada. So this would allow Indigenous groups to have the right to own, use, develop, and control essentially all of Canada if given the framework within Canadian law. Article 10 of UNDRIP is another one that stuck out to me. It says that Indigenous people shall not be forcibly removed from their lands or territories. Keep in mind, again, that essentially all of Canada is considered Indigenous land and then this can be concerning. It says, no relocation shall take place without the free, prior, and informed consent of the Indigenous peoples concerned, and after agreement on just, fair compensation where possible with the option of return. So a concern is obviously the own, use, and develop and control. What does that mean? What are the implications for other people and the land that they own and use? Does it mean that somebody who is Indigenous that is part of an area and they traditionally own that land, could they make claim to where I live? That is the concern that comes up with Bill C-15 and adopting the UNDRIP agreement adopting Bill C-15 to be in line with the United Nations Declaration. We just don't know what that means exactly. And the implications of some of the articles are very concerning. So they want this written into Canadian law. And there you're seeing in the declaration itself, they're talking about this declaration would give the right for Indigenous peoples to have the right to own, use, develop, and control the lands, territories, and resources that they possess by reason of traditional ownership or other traditional occupation or use. So essentially all of Canada, they have the right to own it, use it, develop it, and control it. And so the issue here is obviously, what does that mean for Canadians? We need to coexist together. We need to be peaceful. And this is not the way to go forward if we're going to allow something like this that would essentially create a system where obviously that's going to create issues within it if people can make claims to somebody else that's already living there and say, this is my land and I get the right to it. So I'm Greg Staley signing off. Thank you for tuning in to Diverge Media, and we'll see you next time.